I'm Madeline, 29 years old, and what should have been the happiest announcement of my life turned into a nightmare because of my sister-in-law Stephanie. When my husband Jason and I shared our pregnancy news at his family dinner, everyone seemed thrilled except Stephanie. The tight smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. Something shifted that night, but I never imagined she'd go so far to try to ruin this special time for us. If only I'd recognized the warning signs sooner. Before I get into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you want more stories like mine. I've always been passionate about interior design. After graduating from design school in Boston, I worked my way up at a boutique firm and eventually launched my own business 3 years ago. My career was thriving, and while I dated occasionally, I hadn't found anyone who truly understood my drive and creativity. That all changed when I attended a charity auction for children's art education. I was there to network, admittedly, but fate had other plans. Jason was volunteering at the event, helping to organize the technical aspects of the silent auction system. When the app crashed right before bidding was supposed to start, I watched him calmly troubleshoot while under immense pressure. Something about his quiet confidence and kindness to the flustered event staff caught my attention. Technology, am I right? I said, approaching him after the crisis was averted. He looked up with the warmest brown eyes I'd ever seen and smiled. Always fails at the worst possible moment. We ended up talking through the entire auction. Jason worked as a software engineer for a healthcare company, developing systems that helped doctors track patient care. His passion for using technology to help people matched my desire to create spaces that improved people's daily lives. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers and made plans for dinner the following weekend. Our relationship moved quickly after that. Jason was unlike anyone I'd dated before, thoughtful, stable, and genuinely interested in my work. He'd bring coffee to my studio during big projects and listen attentively when I rambled about color theory or spatial dynamics. Within 6 months, we were practically living together, and after a year, he proposed during a weekend trip to the coast. Meeting Jason's family had been nerve-wracking. His parents, Diane and Thomas, lived in the suburbs and had been married for 35 years. They were the picture of middle-class stability. Diane taught elementary school, and Thomas worked in accounting. I worried they might find me too ambitious or urban for their son. To my relief, they welcomed me warmly. Diane immediately showed interest in my design work, even asking for advice about redecorating their living room. Thomas was quieter but always kind, making sure to include me in family conversations about politics or current events, genuinely interested in my perspective. Then there was Stephanie, Jason's older sister. At 33, she had married her college sweetheart Mike 4 years earlier. They lived just 20 minutes from Jason's parents, and Stephanie worked in human resources while Mike was in sales. On the surface, Stephanie was friendly enough, complimenting my outfit or asking about my latest projects. But there was always something slightly off about our interactions. "So you actually make a living doing that?" she asked when Jason first told his family about my business. Her tone wasn't openly hostile, but the subtle emphasis on actually left me feeling like I needed to defend my career choice. Jason never seemed to notice these small digs. My sister's always been a little blunt. He'd say when I mentioned feeling uncomfortable, "She doesn't mean anything by it." I chose to believe him and did my best to develop a relationship with Stephanie. I invited her to lunch, sent her birthday gifts I put real thought into, and always made an effort to engage with her at family gatherings. Sometimes I thought we were making progress, but then she'd make another comment that left me feeling 2 inches tall. "It must be nice to have such a flexible schedule," she once remarked at Thanksgiving. "Some of us have to be at an office every day." The implication that I didn't work as hard as she did stung, especially considering I often worked 7 days a week to build my business. Despite these tensions with Stephanie, the first 2 years of our marriage were blissful. Jason and I bought a 3-bedroom condo in a historic building, which I lovingly renovated. We traveled when our schedules allowed, adopted a golden retriever named Cooper, and began talking about starting a family. The trying process was more difficult than we anticipated. Month after month of negative pregnancy tests took a toll on both of us. After a year with no success, we consulted fertility specialists who couldn't find anything specifically wrong, but suggested various lifestyle changes and tracking methods. Maybe we're trying too hard, Jason suggested one night after another disappointment. Let's take a break from actively trying for a while. What's meant to be will happen. I agreed, focusing instead on a major client project. 3 months later, when my period was late, I barely got my hopes up. I'd been disappointed too many times. But when the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, I took 3 more just to be sure. All positive. Jason cried when I told him, cradling the tests in his hands like precious artifacts. We're going to be parents, he kept saying in disbelief. We decided to wait until the 12-week mark to tell our families. As the date approached, I suggested hosting a dinner at our place to make the announcement. Let's make it special, I said, already planning the menu and decor in my head. This is going to be one of the most important moments of our lives. Jason agreed enthusiastically, and we set the date for the following Saturday. Little did I know that our joyous announcement would trigger a series of events that would test our marriage and family bonds in ways I never imagined. The day of our announcement dinner arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. I had spent the entire morning cleaning our condo until it gleamed, then decorated with subtle hints about our news. Soft yellow flowers in the centerpiece, a children's book casually placed on the coffee table. Nothing too obvious, but enough that they might catch on after our announcement. The menu was carefully planned, a pasta dish that had been my grandmother's recipe, roasted vegetables, and a special non-alcoholic sparkling cider for the toast. I wanted everything to be perfect. You're going to wear yourself out before they even get here, Jason said, gently taking the vacuum from my hands. Everything looks amazing. Why don't you rest for a bit? I knew he was right, but I couldn't calm the butterflies in my stomach. This would be the first grandchild for Diane and Thomas, and I wanted the announcement to be a moment they'd always remember fondly. At precisely 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Cooper raced to the door, tail wagging furiously as Jason's parents entered bearing a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of wine. The place looks lovely as always, Madeline, Diane said, embracing me warmly. Her perfume was familiar and comforting, like vanilla and clean laundry. Thomas gave me a gentle hug. Something smells delicious in here. Jason took their coats as I arranged Diane's flowers in a vase. Just as I was setting them on the mantel, the doorbell rang again. Stephanie and Mike had arrived. Sorry we're a few minutes late, Stephanie said, though they weren't really. Traffic was a nightmare. She handed me a store-bought cheesecake in a plastic container. For dessert. Thanks, that's thoughtful, I replied, noticing she'd brought one with coffee flavor, which she knew I couldn't stand even before pregnancy made my food aversions worse. But I smiled and put it in the refrigerator anyway. Mike gave me a friendly side hug. Place looks great, Madeline. How's business? I appreciated his genuine interest. Mike had always been easier to talk to than Stephanie. Busy but good. I just finished a major project for a tech startup downtown. We all settled in the living room with drinks. Wine for everyone except me. I'd prepared a convincing story about being on antibiotics for a minor infection to explain my abstinence without giving away the surprise. Conversation flowed easily. Thomas talked about his plans for retirement in a few years, and Diane shared funny stories about her second-grade students. Jason discussed a new project at work while I added comments here and there, my mind constantly drifting to the announcement we'd make during dinner. When we moved to the dining room, my heart began racing. Jason and I had planned to share our news just before dessert. As I served the pasta, I noticed Stephanie watching me closely. You're not having wine tonight, she asked, an eyebrow raised. That's unusual for you. I felt my cheeks flush slightly. Just taking a break from alcohol for a bit. Health kick, you know. She responded, her eyes narrowing slightly. You've been looking a bit different lately. I can't quite put my finger on it. Diane jumped in. This pasta is delicious, Madeline. Would you share the recipe? Grateful for the diversion, I launched into an explanation of my grandmother's cooking techniques, the conversation moving to safer topics. Dinner progressed smoothly until Jason caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. It was time. He stood, tapping his water glass gently with his fork. "Everyone, Madeline and I have something we'd like to share with you all." His voice quivered slightly with emotion, and he reached for my hand as I stood beside him. I took a deep breath. "We're pregnant. Baby Collins will be joining us this fall." The reaction was immediate. Diane gasped and clasped her hands to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Thomas stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor as he moved to embrace his son. "I'm going to be a grandmother," Diane exclaimed, rushing around the table to hug me. "How far along are you? How are you feeling? Have you had an ultrasound yet?" 12 weeks, I answered, tears of joy streaming down my face. "We had our first ultrasound last week. Everything looks perfect." Thomas was patting Jason on the back so hard I worried he might bruise him. "A grandchild," he kept saying, his voice thick with emotion. "My son's going to be a father." In the midst of the celebration, I glanced at Stephanie. Her face was frozen in what appeared to be a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She sat stiffly in her chair, her knuckles white around her water glass. Mike stood and offered congratulations, giving both Jason and me warm hugs. "That's fantastic news, guys. Really fantastic." Finally, Stephanie rose from her seat. "Congratulations," she said, her voice oddly flat despite the smile still fixed on her face. She gave Jason a quick hug, then approached me with visible reluctance. Her embrace was brief and rigid, a formality more than a genuine expression of joy. As everyone settled back into their seats, bubbling with questions and excitement, Stephanie cleared her throat. "Well, I guess I should make a toast." She raised her wine glass. "To Jason and Madeline. Isn't it funny how life works out? Some people try for years to have a baby and others just happen into it. Here's to happy accidents." The room fell silent for a beat too long. Jason's face clouded briefly before he forced a smile. "Thanks, Steph." As Diane launched into questions about the nursery and prenatal care, I noticed Stephanie lean over to whisper something to her mother. Diane's expression flickered momentarily before she turned back to me with a bright smile. The rest of the evening continued with excitement and plans. Diane was already talking about a baby shower, and Thomas was calculating when he could start a college fund for his grandchild. Throughout it all, Jason beamed with pride, completely oblivious to the undercurrent of tension from his sister. After our guests left, I sank onto the sofa, emotionally and physically drained. "That went well, don't you think?" Jason said, sitting beside me and pulling my feet into his lap to massage them. "Mostly," I replied cautiously. "Did you notice anything off about Stephanie's reaction?" Jason frowned slightly. "She seemed happy enough. Maybe a bit surprised. That toast was weird." "About happy accidents?" "We've been married for 2 years, Jason. This baby isn't some teenage mishap." He sighed. "You know Stephanie. She's not always great with words. I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it. And she was whispering to your mom. It seemed, I don't know, conspiratorial somehow." "Mad, you're overthinking this. It's probably just the pregnancy hormones making you extra sensitive." He kissed my forehead. "Everyone's thrilled about the baby. Let's focus on that." I nodded, trying to push away the nagging feeling that Stephanie's reaction signaled trouble ahead. I wanted to believe Jason was right, that my hormones were making me paranoid. But something in my gut told me this was just the beginning. 3 months passed quickly as we settled into the rhythm of pregnancy. My morning sickness finally subsided, replaced by a noticeable baby bump and a new energy that had me reorganizing closets and researching nursery designs with enthusiasm. Jason joked that my nesting instinct had kicked in early, but he supported every new project with the same excitement. Our regular Sunday dinners with Jason's family continued, though I couldn't help noticing Stephanie's increasing interest in my pregnancy, not in a supportive way, but in a manner that felt intrusive and judgmental. "Should you really be eating soft cheese?" she questioned one night as I helped myself to some brie, which my doctor had actually approved. "I read that it can cause listeria." "My doctor gave me a list of foods to avoid," I replied evenly. "This particular cheese is pasteurized and perfectly safe." She raised her eyebrows skeptically. Well, I guess some doctors are more cautious than others. These little comments accumulated like tiny paper cuts, individually insignificant but collectively painful. She questioned my decision to continue working throughout pregnancy, my exercise routine, even the vitamins I took. Each criticism was delivered with a thin veneer of concern that made it difficult to confront without seeming ungrateful for her interest. I was scrolling through baby registry items one Tuesday morning when my phone rang. To my surprise, it was Stephanie. "Madeline, I've been thinking," she began without preamble. "I'd like to host your baby shower." I nearly dropped my phone. "Really? That's unexpected." "Why?" "I'm going to be the baby's aunt. It's traditional for a family member to host." "Of course, I just thought." I trailed off, unsure how to express my reservations without sounding ungrateful. "That would be lovely, thank you." "Great. I'm thinking early June, before you get too uncomfortable." I already mentioned it to Mom, and she's excited to help. "I'll handle everything, you just need to show up." Before I could respond with any input, she continued, "I should get your guest list. Email it over when you have a chance. Nothing too crazy, I'm thinking 20 people max. My house isn't that big." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone, conflicted. On one hand, Stephanie's offer seemed like an olive branch, a chance to improve our relationship before the baby arrived. On the other hand, her controlling approach already made me uneasy. "Maybe this is her way of showing support," Jason suggested when I told him about the call. "You've always said she has trouble expressing emotions. Planning something like this could be how she's connecting with the pregnancy." I wanted to believe he was right. I suppose it would take a lot off my plate. "Exactly. And Mom will be involved too, so it'll be fine." Steph's actually great at organizing events. You should see the work parties she puts together. With cautious optimism, I emailed Stephanie my guest list that evening, including my mother Carol, my best friend Alicia, several cousins I was close with, and friends from both work and college. I also attached a short note expressing my gratitude and mentioning a few theme ideas I'd been considering. Nothing too specific, just gentle suggestions about gender-neutral colors since we decided not to find out the baby's sex before birth. A week later, Stephanie invited me to her house to discuss shower details. I arrived with a small gift basket of her favorite teas as a thank you gesture. "These are lovely," she said, setting the basket aside without much interest. "So, I've decided on a theme already." My heart sank slightly at her dismissive tone, but I smiled encouragingly. "What did you have in mind?" "Ready to pop," she announced proudly. "Everything will be popcorn and balloon-themed. Lots of popping games." I tried to hide my disappointment. It wasn't what I'd envisioned at all. I'd been hoping for something more elegant and less literal. But I reminded myself that this was her gift to me. "That sounds very creative," I managed. "I've already ordered custom invitations," she continued, showing me a design on her phone featuring a cartoon pregnant woman looking ready to burst, with the words, "Madeline's about to pop," in bold letters across the top. The cartoon was unflattering, to say the least. The pregnant woman had a grotesquely exaggerated belly and swollen ankles, looking more miserable than joyful. It wasn't at all how I wanted to be portrayed, but Stephanie was looking at me expectantly. "The invitations are certainly eye-catching," I said carefully. "Have you ordered them already?" "Yep. Paid extra for rush delivery. They'll go out next week." As our planning meeting continued, it became clear that Stephanie had already made decisions about every aspect of the shower without my input. The food would be popcorn bars and candy stations rather than the light brunch I would have preferred. Games included Guess Madeline's waist size and labor pain simulation, with clothespins pinching guests' fingers. When I gently suggested a few alternatives, Stephanie's face hardened. "I'm putting a lot of effort into this, Madeline. If you don't appreciate it, I can always cancel." No, I backpedaled quickly. "Everything sounds very thoughtful. Thank you for doing this." As I was leaving, I noticed a draft guest list on Stephanie's counter. Scanning it quickly, I saw several names I didn't recognize, and noticed that my cousin Brittany was included, despite the fact that we hadn't spoken in years following a bitter family disagreement. "Why is Brittany on this list?" I asked, confused. "We aren't in contact anymore." There's some difficult history there. Stephanie shrugged. Mom mentioned she's family, so I added her. Family should be together at times like this, don't you think? Besides, I already mentioned it to her when I ran into her at the grocery store, and she seemed excited to come. I left Stephanie's house with a growing knot in my stomach. Something felt very wrong about the entire situation, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. Was I being overly sensitive, as Jason often suggested? Or was Stephanie deliberately ignoring my wishes? Over the next few weeks, my concerns multiplied. Friends began contacting me with confusion about the shower details. Some had received invitations with different dates than others. My mother called, perplexed about the location, which had apparently changed twice in the communications she'd received. Is everything all right with the shower, honey? Mom asked during one call. The organization seems a bit chaotic. When I confronted Stephanie about the conflicting information, she laughed dismissively. Oh, there might have been a mix-up with a few invitations. Pregnancy brain must be affecting me too. Don't worry, I sent clarification emails. But the mix-ups continued. Alicia forwarded me an email from Stephanie changing the shower time to 10 a.m., when most of my friends from the city would struggle to arrive on time, despite our agreement on a 1 p.m. start. My mother received a message suggesting she didn't need to bring a gift since grandmothers have already done enough, which left her feeling excluded from the celebration. When Jason came home to find me in tears over yet another shower-related mishap, this time Stephanie had accidentally told everyone to bring unwrapped gifts, eliminating the traditional gift-opening ceremony I'd been looking forward to. He finally acknowledged that something might be amiss. I'll talk to her, he promised, holding me close. There's probably a reasonable explanation for all of this. His conversation with Stephanie resulted in a tearful phone call from her to me, claiming she was trying her best and that my perfectionism was making it impossible to please me. Somehow, I ended up apologizing to her, promising to be more appreciative of her efforts. Family harmony is worth a few compromises, Jason reminded me after I hung up. The shower doesn't have to be perfect. What matters is celebrating the baby with people we love. I nodded in agreement, though the anxiety lingering in my chest told a different story. As the shower date approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that Stephanie wasn't just disorganized, she was deliberately creating chaos. But with no concrete proof beyond mix-ups that could be explained away, I had little choice but to proceed and hope for the best. 6 months into my pregnancy, I was finally feeling comfortable in my changing body. The second trimester had brought a renewed energy and a visible bump that made the pregnancy feel real in a way those early weeks hadn't. Jason and I had finished painting the nursery a soft sage green and assembled the crib his parents had gifted us. Things were falling into place, except for my relationship with Stephanie, which continued to deteriorate despite my best efforts. One Wednesday afternoon, as I was reviewing fabric samples for a client, my phone pinged with a text from Tara, a college friend who lived in another state. Just checking in, everything okay with you and Jason? Heard some concerning things. Call me when you can. Puzzled, I called her immediately. Madeline, I wasn't sure if I should say anything, Tara began hesitantly. But I'm friends with Mike's cousin Lindsay on Facebook, and I've been seeing some weird posts from your sister-in-law. My stomach dropped. What kind of posts? Screenshots coming your way, Tara replied. It's all very passive-aggressive, but clearly about you. Moments later, my phone buzzed with incoming images. The first was a status update from Stephanie. It's amazing how some women suddenly get pregnant after years of career focus when they realize their biological clock is ticking. #JustSaying#trophywife. The post had dozens of comments, many from people I didn't know, but some from extended members of Jason's family. In the comment thread, Stephanie had added, "No names mentioned. But when the shoe fits." Some people trap men with babies when they realize the man might be reconsidering things. I felt physically ill reading the words. The implication that I had somehow trapped Jason with this pregnancy was not just hurtful, it was a blatant lie. We had been actively trying to conceive for over a year before it happened. The next screenshot showed Stephanie responding to someone asking if she was talking about her sister-in-law. I can't say too much, But let's just say my brother deserves better than someone who's always been calculating about her relationships. Ask any of her exes. My head was spinning. I had maintained good relationships with most of my ex-boyfriends. There was no dirt to dig up there, but Stephanie was creating a narrative out of thin air. There were more posts, each more inflammatory than the last. One suggested I had stolen design ideas from colleagues to establish my business. Another implied I was faking pregnancy symptoms for attention. The most recent, posted just yesterday, read, "Can't wait for certain fake people to get a reality check when they realize babies aren't fashion accessories." Hashtag countdown to meltdown. As I scrolled through the screenshots, my hands shaking, another text came through, this time from my cousin Heather. "Weird question, but did you tell people I had an affair with a married man? Your SL messaged me asking for details about what really happened with that professor. I've never even had a professor." The room seemed to tilt around me. Stephanie wasn't just posting vague insinuations. She was actively reaching out to people in my life, fishing for dirt or, worse, creating stories when she couldn't find any. I called Jason immediately, barely able to form words through my tears as I explained what was happening. To my relief, he came home early, his face grim as he reviewed the evidence Tara had sent. "I can't believe she would do this," he said, his voice tight with anger. "This isn't just being competitive or awkward, this is deliberate cruelty." We decided to confront Stephanie directly. Jason suggested doing it in person, but given my emotional state, I opted for a phone call instead. With Jason beside me for support, I dialed her number, putting the call on speaker. "Stephanie, we need to talk about your social media posts," I began after she answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "What posts?" she replied, her tone immediately defensive. "The ones where you imply I trapped your brother with a pregnancy. The ones where you're messaging my friends and family looking for gossip about me." "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said coldly. "I never mentioned your name in any post. If you're seeing yourself in general comments I make, that's your guilty conscience, not my problem." "Stephanie, I've seen the screenshots," Jason interjected. "They're clearly about Madeline. This needs to stop immediately." There was a long pause before Stephanie's voice came back, now trembling with tears. "I can't believe you're attacking me like this. I've done nothing but try to support you both. I'm planning an entire baby shower and this is the thanks I get? False accusations and ambush phone calls." The conversation deteriorated from there. Stephanie denied everything, turned on the waterworks, and eventually hung up after claiming we had deeply hurt her. Within an hour, Jason's phone was lighting up with texts from his parents, concerned about why we were bullying Stephanie. "She's already gotten to them," I said, dropping onto the couch in defeat. "She's spinning this to make us look like the villains." Jason ran his hands through his hair, visibly torn. "I know what I saw in those screenshots, but she's my sister. I've never seen this side of her before. Could there be some misunderstanding?" His wavering support felt like a betrayal. "A misunderstanding?" "Jason, she's systematically trying to destroy my reputation. She's contacting people I haven't spoken to in years, making up lies about me." I know, he said quickly. "I'm just trying to make sense of all this. This isn't the Stephanie I grew up with." Over the next few days, the situation snowballed. More friends forwarded me concerning messages or posts from Stephanie. Jason's family seemed divided, with his parents attempting to stay neutral, but clearly influenced by whatever version of events Stephanie had shared with them. The stress began affecting my health. At my 24-week checkup, my blood pressure was elevated enough to concern my obstetrician, Dr. Chen. "Pregnancy and high stress don't mix well," she warned me. "Is there something going on that's causing you unusual anxiety?" I broke down in her office, explaining the situation through tears. Dr. Chen listened sympathetically before offering practical advice. "Your priority right now has to be your health and your baby's health," she said firmly. "That might mean distancing yourself from toxic situations, even if they involve family. I want you to consider seeing a therapist who specializes in pregnancy-related stress, and I'm going to monitor your blood pressure more frequently." On the drive home, I called my best friend Alicia, who had been my rock throughout this ordeal. She had news of her own to share. "I did some digging," she said. Stephanie's been running a private Facebook group called Truth About Madeline, where she's sharing all these stories about you. One of my coworkers is friends with someone in the group and showed me screenshots. It's bad, mad, really bad. How many people are in this group? I asked, dreading the answer. About 30, including several of Jason's extended family members and some neighbors in their parents' community. The scope of Stephanie's campaign against me was staggering. This wasn't just jealousy or a few thoughtless comments. It was a coordinated effort to isolate me from my support system and undermine my relationships during one of the most vulnerable periods of my life. When I shared this latest discovery with Jason, something finally shifted in his perspective. The evidence was too overwhelming to dismiss any longer. "This ends now," he said, his voice hard with a determination I hadn't heard before. "I've given Stephanie the benefit of the doubt because she's my sister, but she's crossed every line. I won't let her hurt you or our baby anymore." His words should have been comforting, but the damage was already spreading too quickly to contain. With the baby shower just 2 weeks away, I was faced with an impossible choice: endure whatever humiliation Stephanie had planned, or cancel the event and face the inevitable backlash from those who didn't understand the full situation. "We'll get through this," Jason promised, holding me close that night. "Whatever happens at this shower, whatever she's planning, we're a team. I'm with you all the way." I nodded against his chest, wanting desperately to believe him. But as I felt our baby kick inside me, a fierce protectiveness overtook my fear. This wasn't just about me anymore. I would endure Stephanie's tactics for now, gathering evidence and building support. But once our child arrived, I would no longer tolerate anyone who brought toxicity into our lives, family or not. The morning of the baby's shower dawned bright and clear, a beautiful June day that would have been perfect for celebration under different circumstances. Instead of excitement, I felt a sense of dread as I selected a pale blue maternity dress and carefully applied makeup to hide the shadows under my eyes from another restless night. "You look beautiful," Jason said, watching me from the doorway of our bathroom. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? We could still cancel." I smoothed my dress over my 7-month belly. "If we cancel, Stephanie wins. Besides, my mom and Alicia are driving in for this. I can't disappoint them." Jason nodded, though concern lined his face. "I'll keep my phone on. Call me for any reason, and I'll be there in 15 minutes. The plan was for Jason to drop me off at Stephanie's house, then join his father and Mike for a guys' day of golf while the shower took place. Traditionally, the father-to-be arrived at the end of the shower to help transport gifts, and Jason had agreed to this arrangement before we discovered the extent of Stephanie's behavior. My mother had offered to pick me up, giving us a chance to arrive together, which provided some comfort. When her car pulled into our driveway, I hugged Jason tightly before leaving. "It's just a few hours," I reminded myself as much as him. How bad could it be? Mom greeted me with a warm embrace. "You're glowing, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "Physically? Pretty good. Emotionally, that's another story." She squeezed my hand. "I'll be right beside you the whole time. So will Alicia. We won't let anything happen." The drive to Stephanie's suburban home took 30 minutes, during which Mom caught me up on family news, carefully avoiding any mention of the tension with Stephanie. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed fewer cars than I expected. "Looks like we're early," Mom commented, checking her watch. "The invitation said noon, right?" "That's what mine said," I confirmed, a familiar uneasiness settling in my stomach. We approached the front door, which was decorated with a large banner reading about T.O. Pop, featuring the same unflattering cartoon pregnant woman from the invitations. Mom raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she rang the doorbell. Stephanie answered wearing a pink apron over a floral dress, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Madeline. Carol. You're early." I glanced at my watch. The invitation said noon. "It's 11:55. "Oh." Stephanie's hand flew to her mouth in feigned surprise. "Most of the invitations said 1 o'clock. I must have mixed up yours." "Well, come in. You can help with the final preparations." As we entered, I immediately noticed the theme had evolved beyond Ready to Pop. The decorations were a bizarre mix of popcorn strings, actual popped balloons scattered across the floor, and large cutouts of pregnant women in various stages of distress. One poster featured a cartoon woman clutching her belly with the caption, "Hope she doesn't pop here." "This is something," Mom murmured, squeezing my arm supportively. Diane was in the kitchen arranging food platters. She greeted us warmly, though I detected a certain guardedness in her manner. "Madeline, you look wonderful. How are you feeling?" "Good days and bad," I answered honestly. "Today's a good day so far." Stephanie bustled around us, assigning tasks that kept Mom and me separated. I was stationed in the dining room, filling party favor bags with what appeared to be popcorn balls and miniature baby bottles filled with an unidentifiable red liquid. "What's in these bottles?" I asked, holding one up. "Cherry punch," Stephanie replied. "For a game later. Don't worry about it." By 1 o'clock, guests began arriving. I was relieved to see Alicia among the first, rushing to my side with a tight hug and whispering, "What fresh hell is this decor? Are you okay?" I nodded slightly, grateful for her presence. As more guests arrived, I realized something odd. Many of the faces were unfamiliar to me. There were women from Stephanie's office, neighbors I'd never met, and even a few of Jason's distant cousins who lived out of state and with whom we had little contact. "Where are Heather and Lisa?" I asked Alicia quietly, noticing my two close college friends were missing. "They texted me this morning," Alicia replied, frowning. "Apparently their invitations said the shower was next weekend. They're both out of town now." The realization that Stephanie had deliberately excluded my closest friends while filling the guest list with her own acquaintances sent a chill through me. This wasn't just poor planning, it was calculated. My cousin Brittany arrived, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. We exchanged awkward greetings, the years of family tension hanging between us. "Your sister-in-law was very insistent that I come," she explained. "Said it was time to put the past behind us." Before I could respond, Stephanie clapped her hands for attention. "Everyone, let's start with some games while we wait for the stragglers." The first game involved guests estimating the circumference of my belly using string. Stephanie insisted I stand on display while everyone took turns holding string around me, making exaggerated expressions of shock at my size. "I can't believe you still have 2 months to go," one of Stephanie's friends exclaimed. "You're already huge." Alicia's hand found mine, squeezing tightly as I forced a smile through the humiliation. Next came a game called Labor Pain Roulette, where guests picked clothespins from a jar and had to attach them to various body parts to simulate contractions. Stephanie demonstrated by clipping one to her earlobe, wincing dramatically. "Now imagine this pain multiplied by 1,000, lasting for hours," she announced to uncomfortable laughter. "Poor Madeline has all this to look forward to." As the games continued, each seeming designed to emphasize the discomfort and challenges of pregnancy rather than celebrating new life, I noticed my mother's expression growing increasingly stormy. When Stephanie announced it was time for refreshments, Mom followed her into the kitchen under the pretense of helping. Through the door, I could hear their hushed but heated exchange. "Completely inappropriate," Mom was saying. "This is supposed to be a celebration, not a hazing ritual." "It's all in good fun," Stephanie replied defensively. "Maybe you're just overly sensitive." Like mother, like daughter. When they returned, Stephanie's face was flushed with anger, but she maintained her hostess smile as she distributed plates of food. The menu, like everything else, seemed designed for maximum discomfort. Spicy foods known to cause heartburn in pregnant women, soft cheeses I'd previously mentioned avoiding, and virtually nothing that appealed to my current cravings or dietary needs. As I balanced my mostly empty plate on my lap, Stephanie approached with a large glass of the red punch. "Special recipe for the mom-to-be," she announced loudly. "What's in it?" I asked cautiously. "Oh, just fruit juices and ginger ale. Good for digestion." I took a small sip and immediately tasted the strong ginger, which had been triggering my nausea throughout pregnancy, a fact I'd mentioned at a family dinner weeks ago. Before I could set the glass down, Stephanie bumped my arm, causing the red liquid to splash across my blue dress. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed with exaggerated dismay. "I'm so clumsy. Here, let me help clean that up." As she dabbed at my dress with a napkin, pressing harder than necessary against my belly, I caught a glimpse of satisfaction in her eyes. The stains spread across the front of my dress like a crimson wound. "I have a stain remover stick," Alicia said quickly, pulling me toward the bathroom. Once inside with the door closed, I finally let the tears fall. "This is a nightmare," I whispered. "She planned all of this." Alicia worked on my dress with her stain remover. "We can leave, Madeline. Just say the word." I shook my head, wiping my eyes. "We're already halfway through. Let's just get to the gifts and get out of here." When we returned to the living room, Stephanie was setting up a projector and screen. Time for a special presentation before we open gifts. My heart sank as the lights dimmed and a slideshow began, titled Madeline, The Journey to Motherhood. The first few slides showed unflattering photos of me from college, including some I'd never seen before that must have been taken from social media without my permission. These were followed by a series of heavily edited pictures, making me look disheveled, exhausted, or angry throughout my pregnancy. The final slides featured crude photoshopped images of how I might look after giving birth, swollen, haggard, with dark circles and stained clothing. Each slide was accompanied by supposedly funny captions about the realities of motherhood, but the message was clear: pregnancy and motherhood would ruin me. The room had fallen uncomfortably silent, save for a few nervous titters from Stephanie's friends. I could feel all eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. Before I could formulate a response, my mother stood up. "Turn that off," she said, her voice quiet but vibrating with fury. "Now." Stephanie blinked innocently. "It's just a little humor." "There is nothing humorous about humiliating your brother's wife during what should be one of the happiest times of her life," Mom interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "I've sat by watching you orchestrate this entire event to make my daughter uncomfortable, but this crosses a line." The room fell completely silent now. Diane stood as well, moving to the projector and turning it off. "I think that's enough of that," she said, her expression unreadable. Stephanie's face flushed red. "I spent weeks planning the shower. Everything I've done has been to celebrate this baby, and all I get is criticism and drama." "This isn't a celebration," Alicia spoke up, gesturing around the room. "This is a calculated attempt to embarrass and isolate Madeline. We've all seen it happening for months." Tears welled in my eyes as the room divided into uncomfortable murmurs. Some guests began gathering their purses, clearly wanting to escape the tension. "Maybe we should move on to gifts," Diane suggested weakly. The gift opening proceeded in strained silence. Most presents were thoughtful: baby clothes, nursery items, books. When I opened Stephanie's gift, I found a set of baby onesies with crude slogans: "Mommy's biggest mistake" and "I'm why Daddy drinks." I set them aside without comment, my hands shaking. As the last gift was opened and thanked, the doorbell rang. Jason had arrived to help transpo. Before anyone could answer, I stood up, clutching my belly protectively. "No, everything is not okay. We're leaving now." Tears streamed down my face as I turned to the remaining guests. "Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry this ended this way." As Jason helped gather the gifts, confusion written across his face, my mother approached Stephanie, who stood stiffly by the dessert table. "You should be ashamed of yourself," Mom said quietly. "Family doesn't treat family this way. Ever." In the car, surrounded by awkwardly packed gifts, I finally broke down completely, sobbing as I recounted the afternoon's events to Jason. His knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as he listened. "This is my fault," he said finally. "I should have listened to you sooner. I should have protected you from this." "It's not your fault," I managed through tears. "You couldn't have known she'd go this far." "But I should have. The signs were there." He reached for my hand. "This stops now, Madeline. No more benefit of the doubt. No more family peace at your expense. Our baby deserves better than this. You deserve better." As we pulled into our driveway, I felt a strange sense of clarity emerging through the hurt. This shower, painful as it was, had finally exposed Stephanie's behavior for what it truly was, not just to me, but to everyone present. For the first time since our pregnancy announcement, I wasn't alone in seeing the truth. "We need to have a serious conversation with my parents," Jason said as he helped me from the car. "All of us together, including Stephanie." I nodded, resting my hand on my belly where our baby kicked energetically, as if sensing my determination. "Yes, it's time we all face this directly." The next morning, after a night of fitful sleep punctuated by the baby's increasingly vigorous movements, Jason and I sat at our kitchen table strategizing. The shower debacle had finally pushed things to a breaking point, and we both agreed a direct confrontation was necessary. "I've asked my parents to host a family meeting tonight," Jason said, sliding his phone across the table to show me the text exchange. They were reluctant at first, but after I mentioned some of what happened at the shower, they agreed. "Will Stephanie be there?" I asked, anxiety fluttering in my chest. "Yes, and Mike too." I was explicit that everyone needed to be present. He reached for my hand. "I know this is hard, but we need to address this head-on before the baby arrives. I won't have our child born into a family with this kind of toxicity." I nodded, grateful for his firm stance yet dreading the confrontation ahead. "What's our approach?" "The truth," Jason said simply. "We lay out everything that's happened, with evidence. No accusations without proof, no emotional appeals. Just facts." Throughout the day, we prepared. Alicia sent over screenshots she'd collected of Stephanie's social media campaign. I compiled a timeline of incidents starting from our pregnancy announcement. Jason recorded voice memos detailing conversations with extended family members who had been contacted by Stephanie with false stories about our relationship. By the time we pulled up to his parents' suburban home that evening, my nerves were razor-sharp, but I felt prepared. Jason carried a folder containing our evidence, his expression resolute as he helped me from the car. "Remember," he said quietly, "we're doing this for our family, you, me, and the baby. Whatever happens tonight, we're a united front." Diane opened the door before we could knock, her face drawn with worry lines. "Come in," she said, hugging us both briefly. "Everyone's in the living room." As we entered, the tension was palpable. Thomas sat in his recliner, looking uncomfortable in the way men often do when facing family conflict. Mike occupied one end of the sofa, his expression unreadable. And there was Stephanie, perched on the love seat, eyes already red-rimmed from crying. "Thank you all for coming," Jason began, his voice steady. "Madeline and I called this meeting because we need to address some serious issues that have been affecting our family." Before he could continue, Stephanie broke into fresh tears. "I know what this is about," she wailed. "You're still upset about the shower." I already apologized for the slideshow. "I was just trying to be funny." Diane moved to comfort her daughter, casting a reproachful look our way. "Maybe we all need to take a step back and cool down. Pregnancy hormones can make emotions run high for everyone involved." I felt a flash of anger at the implication that my legitimate concerns were merely hormonal overreactions, but Jason spoke before I could. "Mom, with all due respect, this isn't about hormones or a single incident at the shower." His tone was firm but controlled. "This is about a pattern of behavior that's been going on since we announced Madeline's pregnancy." Thomas cleared his throat. "What exactly are you suggesting, son?" Jason opened the folder, laying out printed screenshots on the coffee table. "These are social media posts Stephanie has made implying Madeline trapped me with this pregnancy. Here are messages she sent to Madeline's friends and family fishing for negative information. Here's evidence of a private Facebook group she created called Truth About Madeline, where she shared false stories about my wife." The room fell silent as his parents leaned forward to examine the evidence. Mike's face paled as he recognized some of the posts. "There's more," Jason continued. "The baby shower invitations were deliberately sent with conflicting information to ensure Madeline's closest friends couldn't attend. The theme and games were designed to humiliate her. And this has all been part of a larger campaign to isolate Madeline from her support system during one of the most vulnerable times in her life." Stephanie had stopped crying, her expression shifting from theatrical distress to cold defiance. "You're blowing everything out of proportion. Those posts weren't specifically about Madeline. The shower was just typical baby shower humor." And if her friends couldn't make it, that's hardly my fault. I took a deep breath, finding my voice. Stephanie, you've been targeting me since the moment we announced this pregnancy. I've tried to understand, to make allowances, to maintain peace in the family. But I won't allow my child to be born into an environment where their mother is constantly undermined and attacked. Attacked? Stephanie scoffed. That's so dramatic. If anyone's been attacked, it's me. You've had Jason wrapped around your finger since day one, turning him against his own family. That's enough, Thomas interrupted, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. He was still examining the printouts, his expression growing increasingly troubled. Stephanie, these posts, these messages, please tell me you can explain this. Stephanie's eyes darted around the room, finding no allies as even Diane had grown silent, staring at the evidence with obvious distress. It was just venting, Stephanie insisted, her voice smaller now. Everyone vents about family online. It's not a big deal. Creating a hate group about your sister-in-law is not venting, Jason countered. Deliberately excluding her friends from her baby shower is not venting. Sending her cousin Brittany an invitation despite knowing they're estranged was deliberate troublemaking. Mike, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Steph, did you really do all this? The disappointment in his voice was unmistakable. Stephanie's facade began to crack. Her lower lip trembled as she looked to her husband, finding no support in his expression. You don't understand, she whispered. None of you understand what it's been like. Then help us understand, I said, softening my tone slightly. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you've hated me since the moment we announced this pregnancy. Something broke in Stephanie then. The tears that came weren't the performative sobs from earlier, but raw, ugly crying that bent her double. For years, she gasped between sobs. Mike and I have been trying for 4 years. For years of negative tests, fertility treatments, 3 miscarriages. And then who've only been married 2 years, you get pregnant so easily. Do you have any idea how that felt? To watch everyone fawn over your perfect little life while mine is falling apart. The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. I hadn't known they were struggling with fertility, let alone for so long. Jason looked equally stunned. Why didn't you tell us? He asked quietly. We had no idea you were going through that. Mike moved to sit beside his wife, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. We didn't tell anyone except your parents, he explained. Stephanie didn't want people's pity. We've been in fertility counseling for the past year, trying to deal with the emotional toll. So when you announced your pregnancy, Stephanie continued, wiping her face roughly, something just snapped in me. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair that everything comes so easily to you, Madeline. Your business, your marriage, and now a baby. When I have to fight for every single thing. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, compassion for her struggle, but also anger that she'd channeled her pain into hurting me. I understand infertility is incredibly painful, I said carefully. But Stephanie, we weren't lucky. We tried for over a year. We had our own disappointments each month. And regardless, that doesn't justify trying to destroy my reputation or humiliate me. Diane, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Stephanie, I've supported you through your fertility journey. I've held you while you cried after each loss. But what you've done to Madeline, I can't defend that. It's cruel, and it's beneath you. Thomas nodded in agreement. We raised you better than this. Stephanie seemed to shrink under her parents' disappointment. I know, she whispered. I know it was wrong. I just couldn't stop myself. Every time I saw her with her hand on her belly, or heard Jason talking about the nursery, it was like acid eating away at me. That's why we've been suggesting therapy, Mike said gently. Individual therapy, not just the fertility counseling. The doctor thinks you might be dealing with depression related to our struggles. I don't need therapy, Stephanie snapped, a flash of her defensiveness returning. I need a baby. I need what she has. No, Steph, Jason said firmly. What you need is help. What you've done goes beyond normal jealousy or grief. You systematically tried to destroy Madeline's relationships and reputation. You used personal information to hurt her. You turned what should have been a celebration into an opportunity to humiliate her. That's not healthy behavior. Thomas leaned forward, his expression serious. Stephanie, your mother and I love you. But Jason is right. This behavior can't continue. If you want to be part of your niece or nephew's life, you need professional help. And boundaries, I added quietly but firmly. Clear boundaries about what is and isn't acceptable behavior. For a moment, Stephanie looked as though she might launch into another defensive tirade. But something in her father's expression seemed to reach her. Her shoulders slumped as the fight drained out of her. I don't want to lose my relationship with my brother, she admitted softly. Or the baby. I want to be a good aunt, I really do. I don't know how to handle all these feelings. That's what therapy is for, Mike said, squeezing her hand. And I think it's time we were honest with the whole family about what we've been going through. No more secrets. As the conversation continued, a path forward began to emerge. Stephanie would begin individual therapy immediately. She would delete the Facebook group and make public apologies to those she had contacted with false information. Most importantly, she would maintain limited contact with us until the baby was born, giving everyone space to heal. I am sorry, she said finally, looking directly at me for perhaps the first time that evening. I can't promise I'll stop feeling jealous overnight. But I can promise to work on handling it better. It wasn't a perfect resolution. The hurt she had caused couldn't be erased with a single conversation or apology. But it was a start, an acknowledgement of the problem and a commitment to change. As Jason helped me to my feet, exhaustion washing over me after the emotional confrontation, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, with time and effort, our family could heal from this fracture. One more thing, Jason said as we prepared to leave. Madeline and I have decided not to find out the baby's sex before birth. When they arrive in 2 months, we want all of you to be part of their life. But that depends on actions, not words. This baby deserves a family that respects their mother. His parents nodded solemnly, and even Stephanie managed a small nod of understanding. As we said our goodbyes, the atmosphere remained heavy, but with a sense that the worst of the storm had passed. In the car, Jason reached for my hand. You were amazing in there. So were you, I replied, squeezing his fingers. Do you think anything will really change? He considered this as he pulled out of the driveway. I don't know. But for the first time, everyone's seeing the situation clearly. That's the first step. I rested my free hand on my belly, feeling our baby shift beneath my palm. That's enough for tonight, I agreed. One step at a time. For months later, I sat in our nursery's rocking chair, watching the early November sunlight filter through the sage-green curtains. At 8 months pregnant, my body had taken on a life of its own, swollen ankles, an ever-expanding belly, and the peculiar sensation of little feet and elbows constantly shifting beneath my skin. Despite the physical discomforts, I'd found a sense of peace I hadn't felt since before our pregnancy announcement. The weeks following our family intervention had been quiet. True to her word, Stephanie had maintained her distance, communicating primarily through brief, polite text messages asking how I was feeling or if we needed anything. Jason's parents, perhaps compensating for their earlier failure to recognize the situation, had become almost overly attentive, calling regularly, dropping off home-cooked meals, and checking in on nursery preparations. Your mom called again, I told Jason as he entered the nursery carrying a fresh cup of herbal tea for me. She wants to know if we're sure we don't need help assembling the changing table. He smiled, handing me the steaming mug. I told her yesterday that we finished it last weekend. I think she's just looking for excuses to come over. I don't mind, I admitted. She's been really supportive lately. It's like she's trying to make up for lost time. Jason sat on the ottoman beside my chair. She feels guilty for not seeing what was happening with Stephanie sooner. Dad too. They keep telling me how sorry they are that they didn't believe us right away. I sipped my tea thoughtfully. People see what they want to see, especially when it comes to family. It's easier to believe someone's being oversensitive than to accept that your child is behaving cruelly. The past few months had brought perspective along with the advancing pregnancy. While I hadn't fully forgiven Stephanie, I'd come to understand the complex emotions behind her behavior. Through conversations with Jason and my own therapist, whom I'd started seeing to process the stress of the situation, I'd developed a more nuanced view of family dynamics and pain. "Have you heard from Mike lately?" I asked. Mike had reached out to Jason separately after our intervention, apologizing profusely for not stopping Stephanie's campaign against me. "He texted this morning," Jason replied. "Stephanie's been consistent with her therapy appointments. He says she's doing the work, really confronting some of her issues. Not just about us and the baby, but deeper stuff about competition and self-worth." I nodded, feeling cautiously optimistic. "That's good to hear." A week later, we received an unexpected invitation from Diane. She wanted to host a small family dinner that would double as a low-key baby celebration, explicitly not a replacement shower, just a peaceful gathering before the baby arrived. "What do you think?" Jason asked as we discussed the invitation over breakfast. "It's completely understandable if you're not comfortable with it." I considered how I felt about seeing Stephanie again. "Will she be there?" "Mom says she and Mike are invited, but it's up to us if we want them to come. Steph apparently said she'll respect whatever we decide." That small acknowledgement of boundaries felt significant. "Let's do it," I decided. "But let's keep it small. Just your parents, Stephanie and Mike if they're respectful, and maybe my mom. No extended family, no friends, no pressure." The evening of the dinner, I dressed carefully in a comfortable maxi dress, grateful that the weather was still mild enough to avoid bundling up. As Jason drove us to his parents' house, I felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. "Remember," he said, squeezing my hand at a stoplight, "we can leave at any time. Just give me the signal." I smiled. "Our emergency code word is pineapple, right?" "Exactly. Say pineapple and I'll fake a call from work, claim an emergency, and we're out of there." The lighthearted contingency plan helped ease my tension as we pulled into the driveway. My mother's car was already there, along with Mike's, which meant Stephanie had indeed come. Diane greeted us at the door with gentle hugs, fussing over how beautiful I looked and ushering us into the living room where everyone was gathered. The atmosphere was tentative but warm, with Thomas and my mother already deep in conversation about gardening. Mike stood as we entered, his face lighting up with a genuine smile. "Jason, Madeline, you look fantastic." Stephanie remained seated on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked different somehow, thinner, perhaps, with dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't been sleeping well. When she finally looked up at me, I was struck by the raw vulnerability in her expression. "Hi," she said softly. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, accepting her greeting without elaboration. The wounds were still too fresh for effusive reconciliation, but I could acknowledge her presence civilly. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Diane had prepared all my recent cravings: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes with extra butter, and fresh bread, while carefully avoiding the foods that had been triggering my heartburn. The conversation flowed naturally, focusing on neutral topics like Thomas's upcoming retirement and my mother's new book club. After dessert, as we moved back to the living room for coffee, herbal tea for me, Stephanie approached me hesitantly, holding a small gift bag. "I have something for you," she said. "It's not much, but..." "Well, I wanted you to have it." I accepted the bag with cautious curiosity. Inside was a beautiful hand-knit baby blanket in a soft cream color, along with a card. The blanket was clearly handmade with skill and care, each stitch even and precise. "Did you make this?" I asked, surprised. Stephanie nodded. "My therapist suggested I find activities to channel my emotions constructively. I've been taking knitting classes. It helps, with the anxiety and the difficult thoughts." I ran my fingers over the soft yarn. "It's beautiful work." "Read the card," she requested, her voice barely above a whisper. I opened the envelope and pulled out a simple card with a watercolor of a mother and baby on the front. Inside, Stephanie had written in careful script, "Madeline. Words cannot adequately express how deeply sorry I am for my behavior. What should have been a joyful time for you and Jason became stressful and painful because of my actions. There is no excuse for what I did. My own pain does not justify causing pain to others. I am working hard to address my issues and become someone who can be a positive presence in your child's life. I understand if trust takes time to rebuild, or if it never fully returns. But please know that I am committed to being a better sister-in-law, a better sister to Jason, and hopefully someday, a good aunt to your baby. With sincere regret and hope for healing. Stephanie. I looked up from the card to find Stephanie watching me anxiously, tears shimmering in her eyes. The apology felt genuine, not the defensive, qualified, sorry if you were hurt language she'd used before, but a real acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Thank you for this, I said simply. It means a lot. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I understand that things can't go back to how they were before. I just hope that maybe with time. One step at a time, I replied, echoing the mantra Jason and I had adopted. This is a good step. The rest of the evening passed peacefully. As we prepared to leave, Stephanie approached again, this time with Mike beside her. We wanted to let you know, Mike said, that we've started the adoption process. It's early days, and there's a lot of paperwork and home studies ahead, but we're hopeful. That's wonderful news, Jason said warmly, clapping his friend on the shoulder. You'll be great parents. Stephanie smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. Therapy has helped me realize that how a child comes into your life doesn't matter. What matters is the love you give them once they're there. On the drive home, Jason and I discussed the evening, both feeling cautiously optimistic about the future of our family relationships. She seems different, I acknowledged. More self-aware. Mike says she's doing the work, Jason replied. Really doing it, not just going through the motions. That blanket must have taken her weeks to make. 3 weeks later, after a surprisingly quick labor for a first-time mother, our daughter Emma Grace Collins entered the world at 7 pounds, 4 ounces. She had Jason's dark hair and what the nurses insisted were my eyes, though I thought all newborn eyes looked basically the same. The hospital room filled with flowers and well wishes. Jason's parents visited within hours, their faces transformed with the special joy reserved for first-time grandparents. My mother flew in from Phoenix, already equipped with a camera to document every moment of her first grandchild's life. 2 days after we brought Emma home, Jason received a text from Stephanie asking if she and Mike could visit briefly to meet their niece. After checking with me, he arranged a short visit the following afternoon. When they arrived, Stephanie seemed nervous, hovering in the doorway until I invited her in. Mike carried a tasteful gift basket with practical items for new parents, meal delivery gift cards, premium coffee for the sleepless nights ahead, and soft washcloths that were gentler than the hospital-provided ones. Would you like to hold her? I offered after they had settled on the sofa, surprising myself with the gesture. Stephanie's eyes widened. Are you sure? I nodded, carefully transferring my sleeping daughter into her aunt's arms. As Stephanie cradled Emma, her face softened with wonder. She's perfect, she whispered, gently touching one tiny hand. Absolutely perfect. In that moment, watching my former adversary tenderly holding my daughter, I felt the last hard edges of resentment begin to dissolve. The journey to this point had been painful and complicated, but it had also forced growth and honesty that might otherwise have taken years to achieve. Over the following months, Stephanie continued her therapy and maintained appropriate boundaries, always asking before visiting and respecting our parenting decisions without commentary. She and Mike progressed through the adoption process, eventually being matched with a baby boy due in the summer, Emma's future cousin. Jason and I settled into parenthood with all its challenges and joys. Sleep deprivation became our constant companion, along with a love so fierce it sometimes took my breath away just looking at Emma's sleeping face. One evening, as we sat on the porch swing watching the sunset while Emma napped against my chest, Jason asked, "Do you ever think about how differently things could have gone? If we hadn't confronted the situation with Stephanie?" I considered this, stroking Emma's soft hair. I think about it sometimes. We could have continued with the surface politeness, everyone pretending nothing was wrong. Emma would have grown up in a family full of unspoken tension and resentment. Instead, she'll grow up knowing that families can face difficult truths and come out stronger, Jason said. That relationships take work and honesty. And boundaries, I added. Healthy boundaries are an act of love, not rejection. As Emma stirred against me, her tiny fist clutching my finger in her sleep, I reflected on the complex journey that had brought us to this peaceful moment. The pregnancy that should have been purely joyful had instead become a crucible, testing relationships and revealing character in ways I never expected. Yet, through that painful process, we had all emerged changed. Stephanie was confronting her demons rather than projecting them onto others. Jason had learned to stand firm in defense of our family unit. His parents had recognized their role in enabling unhealthy dynamics. And I had discovered my own strength and capacity for compassionate boundaries. You know what I've realized? I said softly, not wanting to wake Emma. Sometimes the most difficult people in our lives end up teaching us the most important lessons. Jason smiled, wrapping his arm around us both. What lesson did Stephanie teach you? That family isn't just about blood or marriage. It's a choice you make every day, to communicate honestly, to respect boundaries, to work through pain rather than inflicting it on others. I kissed Emma's forehead. That's what I want to teach our daughter. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a profound gratitude for the journey we'd traveled. The road hadn't been easy, but it had led us here, to a stronger marriage, a more authentic family, and the precious daughter sleeping peacefully in my arms. What about you? Have you ever experienced family tension that was ultimately resolved through honest communication? Or do you have a sister-in-law story of your own to share? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories of family challenges and healing. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most difficult chapters of our lives become the most meaningful parts of our story.